So, having said that, I'll do my best to either answer questions or take comments and abuse. Just don't throw anything, because remember, through my Seattle Misquoting threads, I can't see anybody's hand, so I can't tell if there's, maybe they can raise the lights in the room and I can see. That's the stage. More than audience. My questions and comments slide, that's a tile of the floor of Morocco. I don't know if you like the picture. Any questions or comments about this?
There's a question here.
Okay.
It's my understanding of the teaching of the prophets in the Quran that even when you have an enemy that has unjustly waged war and killed unarmed innocent people, that doesn't justify us as Muslims attacking and intentionally killing unarmed and family members who are not fighting us actually. But we all know that there are imams who appear to approve that behavior and will call people who have, say, bombed innocent groups that are not armed or fighting martyrs. Could you explain what in the Quran they appeal to and why they understand that to be consistent with Islam?
So, actually it was interesting when I was living in Seattle, I think they were third graders. Somehow a teacher asked me to come and talk to her class, third grade class. I think it was 2008 or something like that. Which was really interesting because I never talked to third graders before. And I didn't really know what I was supposed to say to them, but they asked me, one student asked me, why are Muslims violent? Or something like that. And I was trying to think how I can answer this question. So I said, okay, when do you think it's okay to fight? When do you think it's okay to use violence? To the students, for example. Somebody attacks you, somebody attacks your mom, somebody takes something from you unfairly, to help your friend, things like that. So I said, these are the exact same reasons the Quran tells people that they can fight. The Quran says you can fight if you are being wronged, you can fight if you're being oppressed religiously, you can fight to get back property or homes that you've been driven from. But if people, you can fight if people attack you, but if they stop attacking, you can't aggress them against them. If they attack you, you can't attack them back disproportionately. And the Quran says very clearly, God does not forbid you from dealing justly and fairly with those people who do not fight you and do not drive you from your homes. Rather, God loves those people who are just and fair and treat people with justice and kindness. So the Quranic rules are very clear. Now, in addition to that, you have the Prophet's teachings that are not in the Quran from the Hadith, where he says, لا تقتلوا نساءكم وأولادكم إلا من قاتل. Don't fight, don't kill. Don't fight and don't kill those people, the women and the children of the enemy, if they don't fight you. So if there's a woman on the battlefield with a sword, then she should combat. But otherwise, anybody who's not on the battlefield, either old men, women, children, monks, for example, people who are like in a monastery, these people cannot be killed. There's debates amongst Muslim scholars, Muslim legal scholars in the medieval period. What about if the enemy army goes into a city and is basically you're besieging the city? Can you use catapults against the city? You might kill civilians. Some Muslim scholars said no, you can't kill any civilians under any circumstances. The majority of Muslim scholars said you can. In this case, there's basically collateral damage, right? Essentially identical to most modern countries' laws of war. And so those are the general rules. But people who are not combatants, women, children, old people, even males who are not on the battlefield or not in uniform, these people can never be targeted specifically. So if there's a bunch of guys standing over there, a Muslim soldier couldn't go and kill them because they're not on the battlefield. They're not the enemies in hiding amongst them or something like that. There's no excusable reason to kill them. Which is why you don't see, if you read Osama bin Laden's missives, there's a great book called Messages to the World, which is the translation of Osama bin Laden's writing. It's very interesting. He doesn't ever actually try say, well, we can just kill civilians. He has to come up with excuses. So in the case of the Pentagon for 9/11, he said these are, the military site. And in the way to justify attacking other civilian locations, he said, okay, wait, America is a democracy. It's okay. He says, we object to American foreign policy. American army attacks Muslims, they kill Muslims, civilians, and that's it. Okay, but they're following the orders of the elected government. And American is a democracy, and Americans vote for George Bush 2000. They were re-elected in 2004. So they are choosing their foreign policy, therefore they're responsible for the foreign policy, therefore they are also legitimate targets. That's bin Laden's argument. That's why he says you can target civilians. And I don't know if I told you this before, any of my students ever had, some of you may have been my students at one point. But I was watching this documentary. I hate watching documentaries. My wife loves documentaries. She made me watch, well, I agreed to watch a documentary. It's probably been recorded. I liked it a lot. It was a great documentary. And this documentary is called The Man from Plains, Georgia. It's about Jimmy Carter. It's about Jimmy Carter when he was writing. He wrote a book called Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And in the documentary, they had interviews with people who were critical of Jimmy Carter's book. And one of them was Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor, who's also a great supporter of Israel. So the maker of the documentary is asking Alan Dershowitz, it was about the 2008 attack on 2008 Gaza war, where the Israelis were bombing Gaza with white phosphorus bombs, killing hundreds of civilians. And he asked Alan Dershowitz, how do you justify this? And Alan Dershowitz said, people of Gaza elected the Hamas government. They elected a terrorist organization as their government. Therefore, they are responsible for that decision. They can be targeted. And my head almost exploded when I heard that. It's the exact same argument that bin Laden was using. And I remember because I used to assign the bin Laden writing to my students when we had our class that we had. It's very surprising to me. So that's a very dangerous logic. And that's not Muslim logic or non-Muslim logic. That's the logic of how do I justify attacking innocent people who have nothing to do with our government through the pretenses, using democracy as a tool to make them accountable. That's a very, very twisted logic and dangerous. Yes? Yeah, purple shirt. You have purple shirt, yeah.
So a question I have is on, this is a question within a lot of religions in terms of science versus religion. And my question is regarding Islam and biological evolution. Because I've heard many different opinions saying biological evolution is completely compatible with Islam, and other opinions, such there's this Turkish TV host named Adnan Oktar who makes it a kind of personal crusade to reject what he calls Darwinism as an ideology. And so I'm curious what your opinion on that is. As you said, no Islamic scholar has ever been called a heretic for a scientific discovery. So
until around 1900.
Okay. So I'm just
very carefully inserted that qualification.
Okay. So within that context, why is that considered controversial? And whatever your opinion on that matter is.
This is a very interesting question. Thanks for asking that. So this is an instance where we have to look at modern Islamic thought as part of global thought. Okay? Now, when Darwin produces his Origins of the Species, and when he and his followers make an argument for evolution and natural selection. I think that really comes to the United States around 1859. It starts circulating globally by the 1860s and 1870s. It has an immediate impact on, because it's like a catalyst for a lot of other ideas that were gelling together around this idea of science. And that there's something called science, and then there's religion. And there's science and religion, and they're against each other. This is the idea that, when we talk about science and religion, we can imagine these two kind of balls, like idea balls on a map or something. A big circle is one called science, one called religion, they're just mashing against each other. That's not, that vision, that concept of reality, this is not automatic. I mean, for many, like I said, for Muslim scholars in the medieval period, that wasn't a problem at all. This was something that emerged in Great Britain, in Western Europe, in Germany, in the 1860s, the 1870s, and the 1880s. And there's this great story of this British schoolboy, this sort of high school student who's running around to his fellow students in the 1880s in England and saying, Darwin disproved the Bible. So you have this enmity between Darwin, science, and then Bible, religion. And if science wins, religion has to lose. So that's the kind of the construction, the mental map that people in Western Europe started developing in the second half of the 1800s. Now, this also influences Muslims, especially in India, in South Asia, because remember, they're living under British colonial rule, and the educational system of the elite is a British educated system, and a lot of Muslim scholars, Muslim intellectuals in India, in British India, are actually trying to reconcile Islam and British imperial rule, Islam and modernity, Islam and science in the new sense of the word. So they basically fall into that same trap of religion versus science. Or how do we prove that Islam is reasonable, that Islam is scientific? Some of the most aggressive defenses of the Bible, let's say, trying to find out a scientific explanation for Noah's flood, come from Muslim scholars like Sir Sayyid Ahmed Khan, who's a great Muslim scholar who died in 1898 and founded a modern Muslim college in near Delhi, a couple of hours from Delhi, called Aligarh, which is still operating today. He actually wrote a commentary on the Bible to defend the Bible against scientific criticisms, trying to come up with scientific explanations. So it says, the Noah's flood was only one region. It wasn't a global flood. It was just one region. So that's his explanation for that. So they fall into the exact same fight as Christians do over the issue of evolution. And for them, like for Christians, defending evolution becomes a defense of religion, and criticizing evolution becomes attacking evolution becomes defending religion, and supporting evolution becomes supporting science. So if you're religious, you have to reject evolution. If you're scientific, you have to support evolution. These are the lines that get drawn in late 19th century European thought, and Muslim scholars who are influenced by that thought fall into that exact same crisis. And that continues until today. And that's why you find that this debate about over evolution is actually, I think, the strongest in Turkey and among South Asian Muslims. Because there's two places where you had very stark, kind of harsh interaction between Western modernity and tradition, and like prolonged exposure. Now, in fact, it's very easy, I think, to believe in both evolution and in Islam as, believe in the Quran and the traditional teachings of Islam. Very easy to do that. There could be any, like, remember I gave you the example of the 2 months that never fall short and all this. There's so many ways to understand the scriptural text. And in fact, there are other things about Islamic theology, in my opinion, which make it extremely easy to explain evolution. I don't want to bore everybody by getting into that. But the fact that it's a conflict, you talked about people like Harun Yahya in Turkey, and people who, I mean, literally their life is devoted to disproving evolution. Why is that? It's such a, in a way, it's really not an important point. It doesn't affect our daily lives. But because of the way that this became like a symbolic issue of this conflict between religion and science, that's why, to this day, there's certain people who are committed to defeating evolution for the sake. And as I said before, I think that's a kind of a canard, it's a distraction. Yes?
Actually, going to the question of evolution, I thought that some Muslim scholars... so going back to the question of evolution, I thought that some scholars push evolution aside because evolution is used to prove that there is no God, that everything evolved and we came to be.
Yeah, I'm not a scientist. I noticed that you guys got this science thing here. But I don't really understand why, I mean, if God, I mean, clearly God likes to make things that grow, right? So human beings are little sperm and egg, and then you have the zygote that's fertilized, and it starts splitting, and then eventually becomes a baby, and then that baby grows and doesn't look anything like it does when it's an adult, and then the adult gets older and looks like a little shriveled raisin, and then it dies. If you're lucky, right? So I mean, I don't really understand why, personally, why evolution is a problem. If God creates this spark, and then it sort of matures into creation and goes through all these stages, and part of it, and then this little monkey starts getting smarter, and then its baby becomes smarter, and then she starts standing up, and eventually get a human being. I don't see why that's a big deal. It seems to make complete sense to me. The problem that scripturally Muslims would have with that, theoretically, is that no, but the Quran talks about Adam, and there's a hadith in which actually classical Muslim scholars debated much more than modern Muslim scholars. There's a hadith in which the Prophet says that God created Adam in his image. This was very problematic to classical Muslim scholars because it seemed to be anthropomorphic. It seemed to be saying that God looks like a human being, which they rejected. So that's why a lot of people had problems with that hadith. Now they have a problem with it because it seems to be going against evolution. But, and this is, I'm sorry, he asked, I don't have to bore you, okay? In the Ash'ari school of theology, which is the majority school of theology for Sunni Muslims, the position is that God recreates the universe every instant. So God is constantly recreating the world. Right in the next instant from now, the second my sentence finishes, we could all just be made of balloons and be in a big field. And then the next instant after that, we could all be just like we are right now. This is entirely possible. God is constantly recreating the world. So if that's the case, then you can have, Australopithecus, which is this sort of monkey that's walking upright, and then getting smarter and smarter and smarter, generation after generation, century after century. And then remember, this is not a continuity. Every instant, God is recreating the world. And then the moment this Australopithecus, which I think is the one before Homo sapiens, I can't remember, Homo habilis. What's the one before Homo sapiens? The one right before Homo sapiens, right? The baby, the mother that gives birth to Homo sapiens, at that instant, in that recreation of the world, suddenly God creates Adam. God creates mankind. Why not? That seems to be a perfectly reasonable explanation for me. Either way, why on earth are we making it a matter of faith? Because what you're doing is you're taking people and you're asking them to disbelieve in science. You're buying into this thing that there's science versus religion. But that's a false dichotomy. You should never disbelieve something that you see in front of you. I mean, At no point in Islam, or Islamic history, or in the scriptures of Islam, are Muslims asked to deny what is demonstrated to be an evident reality. And if, in fact, someone provides evidence that evolution happened, Muslims shouldn't be asked to deny that. And if Muslims are losing faith in their religion because they're being placed in this world versus a dichotomy versus science and religion, because their scholars and their ulama, their leaders are buying into this, think of how many Muslims are losing their faith for no reason. Because of something that was never created by Muslims, a dichotomy that was created by Western Christians. It has nothing to do with Islam. And for which there's any number of completely sensible explanations, like the one that I just gave, I think, that could explain evolution in a way that's totally reconcilable and congruent with Islam. It's just my 2 cents.